My name's Matthew Anderson. I'm the European Culture Editor of the New York Times, and we're very proud to be partnering with the Democracy and Culture Foundation in presenting the Art for Tomorrow talks here in Doha. We've had a couple of days of great sessions in which, as a journalist, it's been great to have an opportunity to stand back from what's happening in the news and to think about what might be coming in the future. We've been talking with artists, arts administrators, and importantly young people as well about some of what are going to be the big stories that we're going to be talking about in the coming years. And we're also very fortunate that the event has been well timed with the opening of a fantastic exhibition at the Al Rawak Museum, Jeff Koons' Lost in America, which some of us were very lucky to have a sneak preview of last night. So this session is going to be a conversation between Her Excellency Sheikha Mayassa and Jeff about the exhibition, about his 40-year career, which is represented in that show. And then at the end, I'll ask a couple of questions and you'll have the opportunity as the audience to put a few forward as well. So without further ado, I hand over to you, Sheikha Mayassa. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Jeff, are you happy about last night?
Sheikha Mayassa, very much so. I'm absolutely so thrilled and honored, and I think the exhibition looks beautiful.
I think I would agree to that. But Jeff, you are one of the most, if not the most influential and complex artists to have emerged since the 1980s. And I feel so privileged to welcome you here on stage. Not only have you been a great friend to Qatar over the decades, I mean, you said last night you've been coming here for 20 years, and the show expands 40 years of your artwork. But this conversation takes place on the occasion of your largest show in the Middle East and Asia, as well as Qatar Museum's Years of Culture program, a culture diplomacy program we began when we won the hosting rights of hosting the World Cup in 22. And today is actually the countdown. Tonight they'll be announcing the countdown for the World Cup. And so I feel like it's a real privilege to have an American artist in the year of Qatar, US, given that US will be one of the hosts next year. But I'm sure everybody's curious to know the title of your show. Why Lost in America?
You know, I enjoyed very much working on the exhibition with the curator, Massimiliano Gioni, and along with the curator here in Doha with Sheikha Thani. And so in speaking with Massimiliano, you know, I was thinking about, I don't know, we would come up with Jeff Koons American or American this, Made in America. And all of a sudden I thought of the film Lost in America, which was made by Albert Brooks, and it was kind of a comedy. And it just seemed like it could mean anything to people. So I think that's, it's a very kind of open to interpretation. And also as a development as an artist, I enjoy continuing to participate with a larger community in the dialogue about art. And if I just be maintained to this dialogue within the States and not internationally, I think it would feel incomplete in the dialogue about universal vocabulary.
So you would say it's an autobiography of your journey in America?
Yes.
And having come here so many times over the years, how did that influence you in selecting the artworks? I know in your more recent exhibitions, you've juxtapositioned works from collections in the museums with your works, but I know here you chose not to do that. So how did you take that direction?
Well, looking at the Al Rawak, the gallery, and the scale of the rooms, and we wanted to, you and I, we spoke over the years many times, Your Excellency, about having an exhibition and wanting to make an exhibition that would, really be retrospective and be ambitious and to have the largest in the region. So we really looked at choosing things that would communicate the ideas behind my work as clearly as possible. And again, I'm very proud. I think there are views that you can see in the exhibition that show my work in its most beautiful light.
I do remember when we first talked about it and you agreed, I told myself this was never going to happen. So I'm so glad it actually did happen. But before we go into the exhibition and the works that you've chosen to exhibit here, I would love to talk a little bit about your parents. I know your father in particular was a big influence as a furniture designer. Because one thing that we're always trying to do here is to connect society with art and the environment and build an environment for artists to flourish. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Okay. The exhibition is autobiographical, so there are a lot of different references to my upbringing. But my father was an interior decorator and had a furniture store. And so I really learned aesthetics from my father. He really cared, and he would have a vision, and he would follow that vision through. I learned that different colors and textures can affect the way you feel. And on my mother's side of the family, my grandfather was city treasurer in New York, and they were all merchants. So I grew up through my aunts and uncles, really having a joy of interacting with people in the community. And I received tremendous support from my parents. They would watch me drawing when I was younger and give me a little pat on the back, and which gave me a sense of self through art.
And when you came to decide to go to university, you chose the Art Institute of Chicago because of the painter Ed Paschke. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I first started in Baltimore at the Maryland Institute College of Art, and then I came into contact with the Chicago Imagist, which Ed Paschke was one, Jim Nutt was another artist, and I really enjoyed their work because it was pop. They were painted on plexiglass, or they would use very bright colors, and their work was about an inward journey. And at this time in my life, I was still very involved with kind of self-discovery. I liked outsider art, art brut, subjective art. And they really were my mentors in informing me about how to find source information in the world.
So would you say that for aspiring artists, it's more important to find the right mentor as opposed to going to the best ranked university?
You know, I've had many mentors. When I think back, I remember my first grade art teacher, and her name was Mrs. Miller. I had her all through lower school, and Mrs. Miller was missing one hand. She didn't have a hand. Right here at her wrist, she just had 5 little nubs. And I think I was really inspired by that, and I realized that art frees you of limitations. And she was absolutely fantastic. So I've had many, many mentors along the way that have informed me really about art and how it can transform your life.
And then when you finished from Chicago, your first job was at the MoMA, right? The Museum of Modern Art, and you were a very successful salesman there.
You know, when I went to art school, I always had to support myself through college. And when I was in Chicago, I was a preparator, and a preparator hangs artworks. And when I moved to New York, that's what I wanted to do. I thought, oh, maybe I can work at the Museum of Modern Art and as a preparator. And I would ask them every day for a job. And they would always say every day, look, there's no job. Please don't call us. You know, we'll call you when you have a job. But one day when I called, they said, look, if you will work in membership development, there's an opening at the membership desk. And I said, you know, I'm in. And so working in membership, I realized that nobody was really promoting membership. And I was bored. I was bored from just telling people that, you know, Guernica's on the 2nd floor. And so I doubled the membership. Just by informing people and interacting with people about, you know, if they would increase their membership, the benefits that they would get. And
so your persistence got you very, very far.
Yes, and I really enjoyed the experience at MoMA because I was able to study the collection every day. I was able to meet a lot of younger artists, and feel like I had a platform in a way to start to participate with the community.
And you also started your career as a painter and then moved into sculpture in 1977 with I Told You Once, I Told You Twice. How did that happen?
Yes, when I was younger, I always, was drawing and painting. I always studied painting. When I was in Chicago, I was a painter. And when I moved to New York, my paintings became so heavy that I couldn't hang them on the wall. So I made this piece. I had to set it on a table. It's the first time that I was working with a ceramic piece, too. There are actually two ceramic pieces there, a woman standing on the top, and there's a vase of artificial flowers there with some deer. But it's also the first time of working with inflatables. And so I worked with an inflatable elephant and an inflatable panda.
Yeah, so this takes us to your next, and a year later you started really working in inflatables and looking at Duchamp. And so can you tell the audience a bit more about these series?
This was a very exciting time for me. I was just an artist from Pennsylvania. I went to art school. I always just wanted to participate. And so to be part of this community of kind of a young avant-garde in New York, and to whatever my limitations were, I was all in. Because I knew that art was this transcending vehicle, and hopefully I could become better and better as an artist, become a better human being. But I was thrilled just to participate. So I came across artists, of course, like Smithson and Judd and Robert Morris, and I was incorporating ideas of minimalism in my work. And I started showing these inflatables as ready-mades, and I enjoyed the type of reflection and abstraction that would be created, and how when you would walk by, you would realize that the whole experience is really dependent on you, and it's all about you.
And when we come to the new Hoover Convertibles, Jeff, what made you think to put new Hoovers behind plexiglass?
Working at MoMA, every day I could look at the collection, and I loved their architecture design department, and I wanted to contribute to the Duchampian dialogue about the ready-made. So I thought that to show objects for their newness, that they're born, their integrity of birth, and the type of gestalt that you would have coming up against these objects that in some ways are better prepared or in more of an eternal state than you are as a human being. For us to have integrity, we have to participate, and these objects would just display their integrity of birth and be at their kind of ultimate state.
And you exhibited these for the first time at the new museum, the window of the new museum in 1980. I find it quite ironic that the curator of the show also comes from the new museum in Doha. So I know there's a lot of artists in the room. It would be really interesting to share how you choose a curator for each space and city that you show in.
Well, I've had a history of working with Massimiliano Gioni in the past. We worked together on an exhibition that was in Mexico City of Marcel Duchamp's work and mine brought together. But Your Excellency, we spoke for many, many years about having this exhibition, and I knew that it was going to be a very large exhibition, and I wanted to be sure that I could work with a curator that could help organize everything and be able to put together the catalog. And, Massimiliano has all those qualifications. And then here in Doha, we're working with, of course, Sheikha Mayassa and her contribution to the exhibition.
Yeah, and Maximiliano did the big Murakami show 10 years ago.
Right.
Let's go to the Equilibrium series. To me, one thing we try to show teachers at schools here is how all subjects can be taught through their visits to museums, and this is more than an artwork. How did you do it?
When I was making the new, I had to spend all my time keeping these plastic vitrines completely clean, keeping the objects very pristine. They're showing their newness. So I wanted to make a new body of work that would be dealing in a philosophical way an ultimate state of being, but would be more biological and would have slightly darker, more masculine color scheme. And, I learned that if you just, as artists, what can you do to make art? Or what can anybody do in life in their areas of interest? And the only thing we really can do is first trust in ourselves. And once we trust in ourselves, we have our interests, and whatever they may be. And if you focus on those interests, it takes you and connects you to a universal vocabulary. And I think the Equilibrium series is a great example of that. I was thinking about ultimate states of being. I opened my self up, and I could see different connections with different images to bring a body of work together.
And then you collaborated with Nike, or how did these Nike posters come about?
When I had an idea for a tank, and thinking, well, I've worked with vitrines before, maybe I could work with an aquarium, and what could I put in the aquarium? Oh, maybe I could put a basketball and have it in equilibrium, or have it in a 50-50 state. And then I'm walking down the street and I noticed these Nike posters. And I was curious about them because they were like sirens, almost like, I've achieved something, you can achieve it too. I've achieved equilibrium, go for it. And then as I continue to look around, then I'd find the tools for equilibrium, which would have been something like the Aqualong or the lifeboat. And the tools were cast into bronze. And of course, they would take you under. And I guess the main message that I thought was in the show is there is no ultimate state of being. It's about going for it in life. That's what's relevant.
Well, here at the Qatar Museums, we love collaborations. You did a collaboration for us recently with Uniqlo. I absolutely love the collection. I bought every single piece. How did you choose which pieces to use for this collaboration, for example? I mean, you choose the rabbit, the ballerina. What did you do?
This is a wonderful collaboration because it involves Dadu. And of course, it's wonderful to try to, have things that are related to artworks be accessible and help communicate in any way to a larger audience. But when you look at a T-shirt, or if you look at a hoodie, and you'll just look at different options. Well, okay, does a balloon dog work well on that? Or what color would the orange balloon dog work well on? Or how can we show the ballerina sculpture? Dealing with different fonts of the name, how can we be playful? But, on different products, such as these products that will be in bookshops or museums, always the amount that would normally come to me, I always direct towards charity.
They're just so happy. I can tell you all my children are wearing your T-shirts, and it's, as you said, it's for a good cause. It's for the Children's Museum that we're opening very soon. And you mentioned Aqualong and the lifeboat earlier when we were talking about the Nike posters. I mean, the Aqualong you created in 1985. You made it for $9,000. It cost you $9,000. You sold it back then for $3,000, and last week it made $15 million. How does that make you feel, Jeff?
Your Excellency, I always just wanted to participate. And so my intention was to break in and to be in dialogue with other artists. And so, I left working at the Museum of Modern Art, and I started selling mutual funds and then eventually commodities so I could make enough money to make these artworks. And my intention was just try to make things, and hopefully I'd be able to start to be, maybe people would start to collect my work, so that the only thing I had to focus on was to make my work. So I was always all in that manner.
So as an artist, you're never motivated by how much an artwork is going to sell. It's all about communicating.
And participating. I mean, I always thought that if I make something of value to society, that people will take care of me. The community will want me to continue to do what I'm doing. That's what I've been interested in. The value I'm interested in is how an artwork can inspire us, how it can give us an essence of our own potential. You know, I love the idea of the avant-garde, and I always think avant-garde artists, if you think back maybe the turn of the 20th century, that they felt that art could transform their lives, and that then in turn they could also transform the lives of a community. And that's what I believe in today.
And if the Aqualong sold for 15, your iconic rabbit sold for 120. It's a subject you use when I ask you to design me a abaya. I love your abaya. I want to wear it every day. But tell us how you went from the Aqualong to the rabbit a year later.
When I started to have the opportunities, I've always have tried to, in life, to say yes to things. And of course, you know, I listen to something, and if something seems that it's not a positive thing, I'll say no. But I always have tried to look at everything as an opportunity and to be at the service of my work, to do things that can help my work and not to do anything that in a way would be like shooting myself in the foot, but do everything to be at the service of my work. As far as the value of the rabbit, I find it completely abstract. I'm honored that society can find it interesting, and that's fantastic. But the real value of an artwork, again, is how you, the individual, looks at something and how you can feel excited and feel stimulated and feel connected to life's energy for your own potential. And so whether it's some child walks by and thinks, oh, I like that, and they feel thrilled, and they think, you know, that turn that I want to do in my dance step, I can jump and I can turn 3 times around.
But that makes you the most expensive living artist today, doesn't it? Doesn't this childlike sculpture make you that?
It may, but what I find of value and what's really exciting and what I'm interested in is that idea that somebody can come into contact and feel excited about their potential.
And we see that with your participation in the Macy's parade, the Macy's Thanksgiving parade, right?
Absolutely. And when I say somebody excited, Sheikha Mayassa, about their potential, I'm not meaning because they looked at my artwork. The artwork could be a stimulator to that, but it's not that in any manner reference to that. It's, you know, the work is just something that is a vehicle for me to try to communicate ideas of acceptance and removal of judgment and things that can give people the confidence to embrace who they are and to be excited about their future.
And then we go into the Banality series. I mean, I think yesterday you were encapsulating everyone there and talking about all the pieces and the objects. You choose a different medium here. You go to wood. How did that happen?
You know, I never wanted to have horizontal development. I always wanted to have kind of a vertical development. So I'll work on ideas, and I'll let things resonate, and then I'll act on them. And then I'll try to bring something to a completion to really kind of exhaust the ideas, and then I'll try to reinvent myself again. And it comes from, you know, wanting to continue to change. And so the Banality show was, I think, an exhibition that let me start to articulate my ideas. And it came out of creating the Kip and Curl. It's in the exhibition at Al Riwaq. But the Kip and Curl was an artwork. There was a little bit of a fiasco when I made it. And because it was a fiasco, I had to recreate the piece in a different manner than I normally would. When I work with ready-made objects, and everything I'd done up to this point was a ready-made, this work was destroyed coming out of the oven when it was cast. And I had to decide to give it radical plastic surgery if I wanted to show the piece. And I chose that, but all the details and all the perfections imperfections of the original work were gone. But it liberated me that I realized what I really cared about, the true ready-made that I cared about, was us, that I cared about the viewer. And I cared about all the viewers' perfections and imperfections. And it was really about having a dialogue with them and paying attention to them and showing them respect, not the object, but to the viewer, that that's who I really cared about. And so it freed me to go on and to create the Banality work and to try to start to articulate the removal of judgment and the practice of acceptance and how we're perfect in our own being, and it's about this moment forward.
One of the things I find very fascinating about the way you work, Jeff, is you outsource or identify the best people to work with you. So for the Banality series, I understood that you worked with a lot of people in Germany and Italy, and I think for artists in this part of the world, it's quite interesting for you to share the process of how you come about creating these works, or any works for that matter.
I always, created my own artworks. I created my vacuum cleaner cases, those plexiglass cases, and sometimes I would hire a welder if I was making a steel stand, but I always made everything. But at a certain point, when I made my equilibrium work, and I went to a foundry because I didn't have my own casting facilities, and I was working with people in the process of casting, I started to trust working with people. And actually, when I cast my first pieces, the artist that I was working beside was Louise Bourgeois. Louise Bourgeois, she was the first artist that I was working with in a foundry as far as beside her. But in my own experience in life and the way of interacting with materials, I was always fearful that the material would manipulate me instead of me manipulating the material. So if I would start off wanting to maybe, with clay make a vase of flowers, that I could end up, making a duck, and that the material would manipulate me. And I've always enjoyed having more of an idea and then having distance that I'm able to oversee, that I stay with that original idea and I'm not manipulated by the form.
Louise Bourgeois has her memento piece here, Maman, at the Convention Center, which will take us to your monumental piece at the Guggenheim in Bilbao, Puppy, that you did you started in 1992. I mean, how can you come up with such an idea, Jeff?
I think it comes from spending a lot of time in Europe and seeing a lot of Baroque and Rococo churches and palaces, and how different polarities are being negotiated. And I wanted to make a work that incorporated organic aspect. And I think that very much a dialogue of whether one wants to serve or be served is being played out in the piece, and control and giving up control. In planting Puppy, there's 60,000 decisions there. Whether there's an orange flower or a yellow flower, or whether it's to get or an impatient or a petunia. So all these different decisions. But at the end of the day, you walk away from it and it's just in nature's hands. Certain plants are going to shoot out 100 centimeters this way. Other ones are going to want to dominate the territory and move this way. So very much a dialogue about control and giving up control.
So I'm aware of time, and I want to cover the rest of the exhibition before we give the audience a chance for Q&A. If we can move to the celebration series, Jeff, that was a very hard moment in your personal life, yet the pieces are so happy. And the room last night looks fantastic. I've never seen your works in such a space before. What were you thinking when you came, with these ideas?
I was invited originally by Anthony Dufay, a gallerist from London, to make a calendar for the gallery. I showed with Anthony, And I would always say no. And finally I said, okay, I'll make a calendar. And I was working on images and photographing them. I made a balloon dog, and I placed it on some Mylar material, and I made cut a piece of cake and put it on Mylar, had a hanging heart, and these different images, tulips, and I photographed them. And I thought, you know, this is too good. This is more than a calendar. I have a whole body of work here. So I started working on the celebration series, but at the same time, I did go through a difficult personal experience. And it was quite devastating to me, and I was really losing trust in society, in humanity. And my artwork really helped pull me through. I thought that, you know, I have to maintain myself, I have to maintain belief, and this work helped me do that. So the type of optimism that's there, I think in anything, if you have something that's light, you also have to have some darkness to find light, and I think that is also within that work.
You spoke about this last night, about the need to remove prejudice and not to judge people and accept people as they are. I think that's such an important message for everyone today.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, I realized that myself, in my own life, I had to accept myself. And so the dialogue really started there, because if I couldn't accept myself, who was I going to accept? I had no future. But as soon as you accept yourself, you're able to transcend that moment and continue to develop. If I didn't do that, art would have disempowered me. I would have felt that I never knew enough. How could I be involved in this? I don't know what I'm supposed to know. And instead, you never have to bring anything to art other than who you are at that moment. And it's all about what meaning you can find in something, what potential, what essence you can find of your own future that has any relevance at all. You don't have to bring anything ever other than yourself.
I love the story of PlayDoh, you know, a work inspired by your son Ludwig. Could you tell us a bit about that?
I was visiting my son, and he was making a mound of Play-Doh, and I'm there with him in the room, and all of a sudden he says, "Dad," and I look over, and Ludwig's there with a mound of Play-Doh in front of him, and he goes, "Voila!" and I looked, and here's this mound of Play-Doh, and I thought, this is perfect. This is what I try to do every day of my life, to make something that you can't make any judgment about it. It's just perfect, you know. And so I went back to my studio and I made some mounds myself, and that's where the mound of Play-Doh comes from.
So I know I've seen you work with children and do workshops before. You're very connected to children, and I want to talk about the Popeye series, because to me this reminds me of my childhood. But I know you have multiple messages in this series. So what inspired you to go to the series of Popeye?
You know, I think, Sheikha Mayassa, the reason a lot of times the images that I work with are youthful is because in our youth we really don't make judgments. I mean, we love the color blue for blue and red for red, and you know, we're just open to everything. We're not making judgments. But I'm attracted to Popeye because I like the saying, "I am what I am," and it also represents my parents' generation. And you know, the spinach of Popeye, when he eats that spinach, it just transforms him into this like super hero, and that's how art is. Art's kind of like the spinach that we have, that if we take it in, it transcends us.
And if we can move to the series that you have a full room in Al Riwaq of the glazing balls, I find it quite interesting that you choose subjects like the Mona Lisa and intervene with the glazing ball. But you spoke about that earlier with the rabbit, so tell us a little bit more what you were thinking here.
Well, you know, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and my neighbors, they would have gazing balls in their yard, and I always thought, what a generous act. And so I always love gazing balls. The rabbit, I always look at it and think of its head as referencing a gazing ball. And I, for decades, wanted to create something with the gazing ball as a ready-made. And finally, I realized I could make plaster casts and show ready-mades, and also I could work with paintings. And so I chose works that are a little bit part of my own DNA culturally, and I'm giving it up to those artists. And at the same time, what I love are those artists are giving it up to their heroes. And like Leonardo is referencing Verrocchio and Masaccio. And the way our genes and DNA are interconnected, our cultural lives outside our body are interconnected in the same way. And we are not the same person when we experience things. You know, we have a gene expression takes place, and it changes our minds, it changes who we are.
And then you have a snowman.
Yes, I also worked, I worked with classic artworks in the 19th century that would been put in plaster casts, and I put gazing balls on them, but also utilitarian objects like a snowman or a mailbox that we have here that's like a V8 engine of a car.
And then you collaborate also with the LVMH. I think it's such a great idea of combining art with luxury retail, but how did you choose or select the artists that you would collaborate with for this production?
You know, the choice of artists could be vaster, and it could be almost, you know, it could be every artist. But I chose artists that, again, within my own history have been very, very influential. And I wanted to make a series that would help inform people about art, that in any way to start to have a dialogue about art. So the artist name's on the outside, but if you open the bag, inside would be a portrait of the artist, and it would be a little biography on the artist about their life history, and then what artists they were influenced by.
So Jeff, our time's up, but I want to go to the last slide that we have here, which is the piece you did as a gift from you to Paris. And this came just around the same time or just after the big retrospective that you did to conclude the Whitney Museum at the Marcel Breuer building in 2014. That then traveled to Centre Pompidou in Paris, and then to Bilbao, the Guggenheim in Bilbao. You know, I know that you gave this as a gift to the Parisians because from you to the people of Paris because of the terrorist attacks. But we've seen so many terrorist attacks in so many places. What made you choose Paris as opposed to London or anywhere else?
You know, I've had a wonderful relationship with France over the years. It was one of the first international countries that I showed in. But the American ambassador, Jane Hartley, called me up after the terrorist attacks and asked if I would have interest in some way of creating some type of program or an artwork that we could show not country to country, but people to people. So it's really a symbol from the American people directly to the French people, that our solidarity with them. So I decided, I told Ambassador Hartley, no wait, I have just the image. And because I remembered when I was working on my tulips for the Celebration series, that one time I had my hand photographed with a bouquet of tulips. And I always thought, that's like the hand of the Statue of Liberty instead of the torch, this bouquet of tulips. And I've always worked with balloons because I like the membrane aspect to them. I love philosophically the idea of inside, outside. And so it, for me, really references our own membrane, our own skin, or the tissue of our own body, our intestine, or our lungs. And so as a gesture, I think these, even though that it's brightly colored and everything, it's referencing something from very profoundly from within us, our solidarity and our support in ideals that we share and have in common. directly from the American people to the French people.
That's a really beautiful story. Just like the French gifted the New Yorkers the Statue of Liberty, Jeff Koons is now gifting the bouquet of tulips to the Parisians. Jeff, thank you. I'm going to open the floor to questions. Oh, Matthew,
thank you so much, Your
you.
Excellency. Just before we go to take some questions from the audience, I'd just like to ask one, ask myself. So the exhibition is taking place under the aegis of the Year of Qatar US. So it's an exercise in cultural diplomacy as well as an artistic statement. And part of being diplomatic is about being sensitive to the cultures that you're presenting works in. So when I was looking through the show yesterday, I was struck that there were some works which, for instance, were a big and much talked about part of, say, the Centre Pompidou Whitney show, which it just wouldn't have been appropriate to show here in Qatar because they were too sexually explicit. So I just wonder if you, Jeff, if you could tell us a bit about how you thought about being sensitive in putting this show together in a different context from how you've usually displayed in the West.
I think, as you just stated, they're in different cultures, there's different sensitivities. And for me, it's really about what we have in common and what type of common future we can find together. And so there's a time and place for everything. And so it's really about our future and finding a way forward that's shared.
That's a typical journalist question, Jeff. Don't worry about it. Can you give the audience?
I've got to ask a spicy one.
Can we give the audience a chance to ask questions?
Of course, of course. Who would like to ask a question for the Sheikha or for Jeff? This gentleman here. Sorry, someone's going to bring you a microphone.
Thank you. I come from Peru, South America. You're a very good person, Mr. Jeff Koons. I can see in you that. Allow me to know something. Do you have some schedule in your work? When do you have the idea, the inspiration, during the day or during the night? When you are in relaxing time, when you're working, or you are restricted yourself? Thank you.
You know, I always enjoy opening myself up to everything. I try to make no judgments about everything and to be open to everything so that I can feel empowered and I can feel that everything is at my disposal. Just every image, every object, just complete life experience. And I let things resonate. And I remember a journalist asked me after having an exhibition, the Banality show, and it was a huge show in New York. It was, people would say it was the biggest show since Liechtenstein's show back in the 60s. And they asked me, aren't you afraid it's going to leave you? And leave you, yeah, art, aren't you afraid? And so I started to think, well, what is it that you do? What can you do in life? And I realized the only thing that any of us can do, no matter what profession we're involved with, is follow our interests. What else do we have other than our interests? And so I follow my interests. I focus on them. I let them resonate all the time when I'm interacting with my family or whether I'm at my studio or whatever I'm doing. And what continues to fascinate me more and more and what I find more and more joy in is what I continue to follow. And at a certain point, I make a commitment that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then I see it through. But usually this resonating time period's at least 2 years. And even though when I finally decide this is what I'm going to do, it feels like it was yesterday.
This lady here in the front row, can we have a microphone to her, please?
Thank you. My name is Hamad. This was a fascinating talk. I've read about you so much, but understanding the stages of your development, now I can understand every piece and where it goes in the historical timeline where you're going. And it really fascinated me that you said that the importance is the perception of the viewer. how does the viewer understand what he sees? So do you see yourself as capturing the time, the present, or projection of the future?
I like to be involved with works that are metaphysical. And I love Nietzsche's definition of metaphysics, which is the past, present, and the future. And so I'm interested in works that are that deal with the past, that you feel a sense of human history in them. You feel a sense of this moment in time, our relation to our past and to this moment, but the essence of our future, that we have our foot forward into the future. That's really the type of dialogue that I'm trying to have in every work that I do.
Do we have any more questions? There's a lady just through there.
Hello, my name is Dana Saeed, and thank you for this very interesting talk. As you may know, Qatar museums have projects of installing art installations in Doha and in the airport, starting from the airport, like the Lamper, which became an iconic art piece, and for Kaus also, and Otoniel. So I'm curious to know if there's any project that would involve one of your pieces in Doha as an art, public art installation.
Maybe.
Thank you.
We don't disclose things until the time is right, so I keep you in suspension.
This lady here.
There's a girl in the back.
The only thing I could say is I would be honored.
Don't put pressure, Jeff.
Hiya, I'm Yasmin, I'm from London, flew in this morning. It was really great to hear both of you in conversation. Jeff, I was really interested in what you were talking about as art as spinach and the way Popeye used to consume it. And the question is for Her Excellency. Is that why you're pioneering so many varied forms of art in Doha for the nationals here, as well as all of us from abroad, to take in and consume, from fashion to the cultural, social exhibitions? Is that what you want to leave behind? What sort of a legacy?
That's what my country wants, and I feel very privileged to be leading this sector. I think what we're trying to do, or we've quickly realized, that the arts are interdisciplinary. So when we began the Fire Station Artist in Residency, we realized very quickly there are many fashion designers applying, and many entrepreneurs, culture entrepreneurs, that are applying for the residency, which is why we created M7. And if you haven't been, I really encourage you to go. Not only do we have the Dior exhibition there, but we have Scale 7, where young entrepreneurs are hard at work trying to create their own companies. And next March, next spring, we have Liwan, a design residency. I can see Aisha Suwaidi is here. It's led by Aisha. And it will incubate designers and projects that we're working with. India's here. We're working with India Maldavi. And she's going to take in young designers to activate her project. So part of our National Vision 2030, we look at economic diversification. And culture, or the creative economy, is one of the largest and most strongest, let's say, sector that we need to grow, and that's why we're investing in these resources. But the public artworks that we install are strategic, and it's always aligned with our way of communication, as Jeff said. Like the recent installation of Pus at the Souk Waqif was in the occasion of Qatar beating Saudi Arabia at the Asian Cup, because we were going through the blockade, and the championship was happening in the UAE, and so we thought this was a double or triple celebration, let's say. And we had purchased the work a while back, but we installed it on that occasion. So that's what we're trying to do. I think we have time for one more question, if anybody has a question.
This gentleman here.
Her Excellency, Mr. Chef, congratulations and thank you for the opportunity of being here. I would like to address you both in a simple but I believe profound question. How would you define yourself?
Complex. Complex question, I meant to say. I think he's asking you the question, not me.
I'm very fortunate. Very fortunate that I had very loving parents, very loving family around me who tried to provide experience to me in my youth, and it gave me a sense of support that I was able to have enough confidence in a way to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that came my way, to be open to them. And to be sitting here today, to be in dialogue with an international community about our possibilities within the humanities, I'm humbled.
Optimistic note on which to end today's discussion. So I'd just like to hand over to Achilles to wrap things up.
So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Your Excellency, Jeff. It was great. Thank you all for being here in Doha. I hope you will join us next year. We're going to Athens on June 16 and 17. And I guess, Your Excellency, at this point, you hand over the baton to the First Lady of Greece, Mareva Grabowski-Mitsotakis. And Jeff, lost in America, will come to Greece and help us all find ourselves in Athens. So you've been there from the very beginning. We would love to have you back next year. Thank you all.
Thank you.